Good morning, everybody. Welcome to an existential look at what we do. The question is, do you really need a cable channel? Any thoughts just off the bat? What do you think? Do you need one?
Yeah.
Why do you need it?
For the elderly who can't see their church services because they don't know how to use YouTube.
Anybody else? Jeff?
Yeah, I just mentioned this in the last session I was at, that we're starting to launch a new channel, a third channel, and we're not going to be on Charter unless something changes. We're going to only be on TDS streaming. There's not a single person I tell that to that doesn't say, "Oh, you're not going to be on Charter." So I mean, there's still that, there's still that cachet that Charter has.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, the reason that we came up with this sort of is because there are several communities, actually a couple of them right here in Wisconsin, who have just recently given back their cable channels. Superior and Dotchville, both small, comparatively small, but as significant, of course. Mostly due to financial or personnel concerns. But the question is, how valuable is it? Well, my opinion, if you've got a cable channel, hold on to it. As Jeremy was just saying, a lot of your cable viewers are seniors. And they are people who are not necessarily that adept or want to be that adept at using Facebook or YouTube or some of the other places. So there has to be, if you're truly concerned about getting to all audiences, then I think it's very important that you hang on to your cable channel, no matter what. If you are in the situation where you've had this, and I know this because in Elk Grove, one of the cable channels was run by Harper College. And the college decided a couple of years ago that they weren't interested in, they were using it mostly for television classes, and they decided that they weren't going to do that anymore, and so they shut it down. Not a word. One day you turned on the television and it was gone. It's still blank to this day. So I tell people, if they're in this situation, put something on it. Put some information on it. I have part of the day. I have programming. I have a program called Village News. It is a PowerPoint. I update it whenever I can, but basically it sits there on the channel with music underneath of it. We run PSAs with it, or pretty much anything I could think of to fill that time, because losing that channel, as you'll hear from some of our speakers, it can be a problem. Here's some examples of some free stuff you can put on. UCTV, the University of California, makes a lot of different programs that they allow you to run for free. Classic Arts Showcase. I noticed in the hotel here that the system they have runs Classic Arts Showcase. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I love it myself. It is basically videos of everything from classical performances to film clips to shows about the visual arts. It runs 24/7, and it is absolutely free to run. All you have to do is let them know that you're going to run it. And you can put it on, and I think the other thing is you have to tell them what time during the day you're going to run it. But other than that, there's no charge for it. And they have a stream, runs 24 hours a day, and you can, I inquired with them, and you can hook that stream right to your playback and run it whenever programming isn't, your regular programming isn't running. NASA, huge. Again, they have a large library of programming. They have a regular stream, runs 24/7, and it costs nothing to put it on. Deutsche Welle, otherwise known as DWTV, they are a German broadcaster, and they do lots of different shows that are geared mostly to information from Europe, but they do stuff from all over the country. They have a show called Conflict Zone, for example, that had they had Alan Dershowitz on this past week. So they do interviews from all over the world. It's all in English, although if you want the German version, you can download it. And in this case, they have you use FileZilla to download new shows. The shows change over every week. And again, it's all free. So those are just some examples of what you can put on the channel if you don't have anything to put on it. Also, holding on to the channel can possibly give you a little bit of leverage at negotiation time. If you give up a channel, it is going to be nearly impossible to get it back. That's just not gonna happen. We all know that what the cable company wants to do is monetize everything, every channel that they have. And if you give up that channel, they're going to put something on it that they'll get paid to do. I've always talked about the fact that I do the programming that I do nothing but good quality programming that promotes the cable channel. Well, not directly, but we're doing good things. We're giving people lots of local information. Cable company doesn't see it that way. They see it as just, a lot of people see it as just another channel, another wasted channel, when they could put, TV Land 2 on it or something like that. So it's very important I think it's very important to hang on to that channel. But let's get a little more into the possible effects and possible looks, possible situations rather that can happen if you decide you want to give up a channel, or can you create a channel that's not on cable and still be effective? It involves different types of funding. Financing rules are obviously a lot different. And those are some of the things we're going to talk about with our speakers. Mark Lundeen, who is the who is the Marketing and Member Services Coordinator for WCM, who is currently putting together a internet-only PEG channel in his community. And of course, Mike Wassenaar, the president of ACM, who deals with all kinds of situations, and this is one that has been coming up. I think you said there were in some other states the same thing has been happening. So that's what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike, and he's going to give you his opinion on this interesting subject.
Okay.
So here we go.
This is on, right? Okay. So, my grandmother was part of the Lutheran Synod here in Wisconsin. I'm going to give you an agnostic opinion here on this. I think it depends on your mission and how you define delivery of services to your audiences. And I just want to stress this a little bit because I come from a community media tradition that is about audience delivery, and that isn't community television's historic, place. Community television's historic place was as a speaker platform. It wasn't necessarily as an audience, as a way to be able to serve audiences. Increasingly, I think, organizations that do our work across the country realize that their service to audience is just as important or more important than their service to speakers. And sort of finding a way to be able to tap into audiences, to engage audiences, to be able to fill a mission need at the local level in communities that aren't being served by other media organizations is a meaningful and worthwhile task, right? That said, I talk to organizations around the country that are faced with, particularly in charter states, where you have Charter's cable plant falling apart because of lack of maintenance, forced to look at a fundamental question. So like the chart earlier this morning that had sort of the red, yellow, and green communities. I've talked to a host of red communities across the country in states like Kentucky, Ohio, Maine, California, Texas, where this question is coming up. I have 40-year-old DMODs. They're in a back room somewhere in my facility. I am totally digital. I am doing HD output. I had a conversation with a woman in Westfield, Ohio 2 weeks ago, where she called me up to have a 45-minute conversation to see if she was nuts, right? The conversation goes like this. I have a Castus service. One of your vendors here today, but this could also be someone who's a Tightrope customer or a Telview customer. I have a Castus service. I am delivering to an app. I am delivering streaming on my on my website. I have a Roku channel. I have an Apple channel, and I think she has a Prime channel too. She has a community of 60,000 people. It's a large township in Ohio. Okay, she's a municipal service, and she's looking at these failed DMODs, and the company rep comes up and says, "Hey, those are going to fail someday. It sure would be awful if something happened to that crappy TV channel that you've got that nobody watches. Sure would be awful if something happened to that. Wouldn't you want to pay $600 a month for our data service and pay for the transport and pay for this?" And oh, by the way, I just wanted to kind of check in with you now because our prices are going up in the spring. So you can get a deal now. We're going to cut you in on a deal. And she called me up and said, "Listen, am I nuts to say when that equipment fails, it's been great?" Am I wrong? And to tell you the truth, if they are delivering services to customers and can document it in a way that they never could with a cable plant, I have a hard time saying no on the basis of their investment to services if they're actually trying to build audiences on those devices that they deliver to. So the question I had to her is, what do people use in your community? This is very similar to the question that our colleagues at the Listening Post Collective ask when they do community media work. They ask audiences what technologies they use. How do they communicate with one another? It's the reason why, you know, Sun Prairie has a community radio station as well as community television operation. Right? Because we know that people use different means of communication in their lives. And you can reach different audiences within a locality through different means. So like in Jeff's instance, he has many different tools in the toolbox. Right? Our friend in Westfield, Ohio, she has many different tools in the toolbox. The cable tool is dull and failing, right? It's hard for me to argue if her community doesn't have the funds to be able to pay for that service, that she can't actually document anybody watches to fight for it. And there's a part of me that says that it's not right that if a community pays for a service that the company doesn't invest in, something has to be done about that. That's me as a consumer advocate saying consumers are paying for a service that they're not getting. And there's been a historic underinvestment in the cable plant, right? That's why those DMODs are failing. It's not, you know, ooh, they're old. No, it's because the company didn't reinvest in them. Or alternatively, they changed the laws to ensure that their obligation to reinvest in their physical plant could be passed on to consumers, and then they could actually pass on the obligation to municipalities, and then actually pass on the obligation altogether. Right? So that's like me being mad at an injustice, as opposed to me looking at the raw payback and thinking about how you build service to community. So the question I asked her was, do you know how many of those 60,000 residents use cable? What's that cable penetration rate? She doesn't know. You guys know that here in Wisconsin because of that DFI data. Extremely valuable to help in terms of thinking about these calculations. Do you know how many people in your community are using these online services? Do you actually promote them so that you're building audience and building relationships? Because, I mean, I think my argument is that should be the mission of our organizations. It should be communications and connections with community, as opposed to being just a speaker platform where there's no connection and you don't know who's watching anything. Right? We're about connecting people to information that's useful in their lives, telling people about health information, public safety information. That's got to be part of our work. John, you've got your hand up.
Yes. I battled this a lot as well.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, coming back to what PEG before, but now it being a municipality, is
Yeah, you're on. Yeah, we can hear you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Franchise fees. Obviously, PEG side is huge, but like I see it, and our budget goes down. Now, I'm not relying on it as much as being a part of the city, but I'm sure a lot of other community stations are relying on that. How do we get streaming stuff somewhat help paid for by those franchises?
So there's no reason why a municipality can't use a franchise fee for its own purpose. They're fungible under federal law, right? And that could be, you know, applying it to the work of an independent 501c3 or to a school district or community college or to any purpose that they have. The question is like, how do you get other value to be able to pay the bills so you can employ people to create content?
Or like, how do we, because we're getting less franchise fees because there's less subscribers to cable versus everybody has, say everybody's
So-
wrong, but more people have internet. How do we get money from that part of it?
So in certain states, there's a discussion of trying to find ways to be able to capture tax revenue. There's a bill right now that's being discussed in Vermont that would have to do with pole attachment fees. There's a bill in New York that looks at equalizing cable franchise fees with satellite fees, as has been done in states like North Carolina and Connecticut, and also with taxes on streaming services. There's a bill in Minnesota that came up. There's a tax on streaming services. None of these bills yet have, with the exception of the Vermont bill, I think, none of these bills have a critical mass yet. There's also a Massachusetts bill that's going to be that is building that would again have an equalization of fees for streaming services to be able to go back to local municipalities and to video providers. The problem, I think, in each of those cases, I mean, if we're looking at the Wisconsin context or the Iowa context for you, John, is like you've got even less bodies in Iowa to advocate for change of state law than we have in Wisconsin. In a place like Vermont or New York, there's a greater chance of success because there's a greater coalition to be able to change that law. I don't think there's going to be a federal solution anytime soon, so there's got to be a state solution for that. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is that organizations have to find ways to be able to find donated and earned revenue to come in the door. A municipality doesn't have that freedom. No one gives a donation to local government. So local governments have to make a case and advocate for their impact. So for all of us, our jobs have to be about making a case. Making a case for why audiences love you, making a case for why donors should support you, making a case for why local governments should be making an investment in service delivery that's meaningful to residents, right? So I know we're all good at creating content. We need to be thinking about making a case for why we're important, and we need to be building meaning and importance in our local communities, right? That's got to be our job anyway, I think. I think the other aspect of what you raise is I think something that has to be on everyone's mind, and I don't want this to rain on anyone's parade. It's not clear to me how long the cable industry will sell cable. Because if they're selling a package of broadband with video apps and there's no law at the state or local level or the federal level that prevents them from simply dropping cable service, even though they still own the plant, they may actually own the app, but they're claiming that it's not cable delivery because of the IP and app environment. That's going to have to be a legal fight that we look at specifically with allies across the country that care about these services. So, like, my plea to everybody in the room is, do you need a cable channel? If people in your community are relying upon your services and they watch cable, yes. If no one cares about you, I don't know that you need a cable channel. Do people care about you? Jeff? Not you. Do people care about Sun Prairie? Can we
I think the answer to the first one's probably no.
No, I didn't mean you, but you know what I'm saying. Do people care about the services that are you providing?
Of course, we all want to think so. People
You,
tell me that every
but
day.
you do have evidence. You have recurring evidence that people care about your service.
I have anecdotal evidence.
That's recurring.
Yeah.
More than just one thing happening. So,
Correct.
all right. Okay. So maybe you're going in the right direction.
Maybe. Who knows?
But I think this is sort of a question we need to be thinking about in terms of service delivery to communities. If you've got an industry that's walking away, they'll still have cable franchises. They may not have any money going through the cable franchises back to local authorities. So that's a bigger fight that we have to be thinking about in terms of our allies at the municipal level. And I'd suggest that they have an interest in this because in some communities, cable franchise fees, make up operating revenue for local government in the first place. And I think that may be the battle ahead. So,
Yeah, I just appreciate what you said there because I think that's the main battle that I think we all have to.
You're good for the camera.
Yeah, here we go. All right, really at the same time, Oregon came in earlier and said, you know, it doesn't matter about the money because the city can take the money, not give it to me and fill potholes. So the reality is that it's the municipal government we need to keep happy and loving what we do.
But that means you have to be doing something meaningful.
Exactly, exactly.
And
To
you,
our community. So I'm just saying, I appreciate what you're saying, that the HD channel's high in the sky, but we don't on a daily basis think about that, because that's not where we're at. We're at this local level.
well, and I would say for the HD question, and I want you to hear about what Mark's doing in Hayward, because it's really important, I think. The HD question is a legitimate one because it prevents you from actually being able to build meaningful communications in your communities. If 100% of the television sets that are sold in your community are HD, right? There's a Best Buy in, keep picking out Sun Prairie. There's a Best Buy in Fitchburg, isn't there, Jeremy?
There's not.
Okay, there's not a Best Buy. Oh, there's not a Best.
Same distance.
Okay, where's a big box retailer? There's a Costco. There's a Costco somewhere here in
Verona.
Verona. You go to the Verona Costco, okay? You cannot buy an SD television at Costco, right? And actually, there hasn't been an SD television sold in America since 2009 commercially. On secondary markets, scrap heaps, giveaways at garage sales, sure. But like, why do we accept that? We shouldn't accept that, and that's got to be the argument that's made to consumer authorities, because consumers are being shortchanged. This isn't about us. It's about consumers paying money for something that they're not getting, right? And then it prevents you from actually building worth, building service, and building audience, right? And you know, if penetration is 40%, that's still a predominant delivery mechanism for a good number of people in your community who need information about how local democracy works, health information. During the pandemic, we know certainly was the case, fire and safety information, local business development information, educational opportunity, language opportunities if they don't speak English as a first language. We know that those services are needed in our communities. I need to shut up to give Mark the thing. I keep going and going and going, but go ahead. And
Is it wrong to use our avenues of communication, social media, whatnot, to say, hey, if you want to watch us in HD, TDS is your provider?
No, I think there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's quite common for one service or another to have full features. Like, for example, if you've got a Verizon service, you can't get electronic program guides because of how they set up Verizon for the technical plants and the wire centers when they first came in 2006, 2007. But there's nothing wrong with you saying, you know, if you want to be happy, well, not if you want to be happy, you don't want to sell soap. There's nothing wrong with you saying, you're enjoying how this looks? It's available in HD on TDS. I see nothing wrong with that. Obviously, don't say anything bad about the other provider. Say something good about the folks that are actually providing services to people that need them. Hey, I just bought this lovely TV at Costco. I want to see the local hockey game in HD. Wow. Yeah.
I just want to comment. I agree with everything you're saying. Will said it right too. To paint the picture for Fitchburg, and Fitchburg works out of the government, right? We're based out of our local municipality. Our fees were going down constantly. It's a growing city with franchise fees going down, and we have a 54% is made up of apartments now in Fitchburg. We totally changed over, and it adds up to. It's a younger crowd, it's a younger city, it's a younger viewership. And now finding from the DFI that our cable piece is 35%. 35% in a city that is growing.
Are those also multiple dwelling units that are served? See,
Very,
that's an issue too, because basically you make, yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna pose the point here that, you know, I think you really gotta dive into your community and don't assume things. Ross, I love what you said about keeping the other channel. We tried what you just said and it failed. we put stuff on there, we held it, we put things that were pre-made that we weren't making. It was going against our will of making our own programming,
Yeah.
sharing it, but it didn't work out. We dropped it. We just dropped it last year. And we're gonna continue to move to that path towards what Mark is doing. And we're already promoting that we have streaming TV because we've been streaming since 2010. That's the route, right? We don't care about the HD quality of cable TV. We care that we had a way of people watching it the one way. Paul, I've always gone and said Spectrum is the worst and said it on air many times. There's nothing wrong with saying that. If they're not gonna serve you, then,
Well,
you know.
I mean, I mean, and the other thing, it's just to add one thing onto this. I mean, the other thing I'd suggest is that if your community if the township has some kind of outreach organ, you know, somebody who does outreach for services, that's like a way to be able to build relationships,
We did it.
right?
Took it over.
Right. I mean, so like, I've often thought that, like, you know, having a clipboard and being outside the farmers market on Saturdays and telling people about the service and signing them up for your email is probably like the most effective sort of one-on-one outreach you could be doing to be able to get people, you know, engaged in terms of knowing what's going on your channels and your apps and the like. But you almost have to build the audience one by one.
And we sat in a senior center for a week, did a live show for a week, and we talked to 55 residents that came through. Not one of them had cable TV. Not one of them.
So,
And that was our assumption for the longest time is, well, we're still hitting the older audience. We talked to them directly. They couldn't afford cable TV. That's a reality.
I just wanted to ask you if these new developments that you're talking about, the multifamilies, do you know for a fact that Spectrum is actually serving them? Because you know state law does not require them to serve whole cities anymore.
So we're
That's what I just wanted to know.
Yeah, we're in our government agency, so I have access to the records that come in for Public Works. So I know every developer and what they're choosing to put in TDS, AT&T, or Charter. So I know what's there and what's going in. So yes, the answer would be yes. I know what's offered.
So one last thing. So like to get back to the example and then I'll hand this to Mark. To get back to that Ohio example, you know, I left her to say, I don't think you've made a bad decision by saying that you're not going to pay something that you can't justify in your local budget. I'm not going to argue with you about that. By having those alternate delivery mechanisms, you've created the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. You can walk away from a bad deal. You're not forced at the barrel of a gun to pay money you may not have. Right? But the thing I said to her is, I hope by God you're building audiences with the tools that you've got. Because that's something that she could never do with the channel. Right? So, do you need a cable channel? It depends. I think it depends. And I'm not going to argue against delivery. I'm going to argue for building meaning in local communities.
Okay, thank you.
And-
we will
and-
continue this, Mark?
Yeah, and that's where I come from. I've been in cable back in the early '80s. I knew Mike when he was in St. Paul, and back then ACM was the NFLCP. In fact, I was the one that helped design the one drum logo on that. So it's a long way back. Fast forward to about 10 years ago, I moved out of Minneapolis and went to Hayward, Wisconsin. And first thing I looked for was, where's their PEG access station here? Went to the city. They have no idea what I was talking about. I said, what are you getting for franchise fees? The city clerk had no idea what I was talking about because they didn't know that they were getting that funding. Then I decided, well, I was going to talk to James in Rice Lake because he's about an hour south of me. He's the closest PEG access center that's running. So I talked with him. How's it going? What's happening? Oh, you need to talk to Mary, and talk to her about. Because I didn't understand the landscape of how the state have taken over franchise fees and what was happening there, and I started to see this diminishing line in my future and thought, I'm not even going to start down that road. City of Hayward is about 3,000 people. Town of Hayward and the Lakuta Rave Reservation rounds us out to about 7,000 households. Most of them get their service from Spectrum, but again, we have every single little village and the tribe and the townships all have their own franchise agreement if they have any at all. So I'm not going to be able to get them together in a cable commission and pool all their funds together. And for all of that work, what do I get? So I do understand what Ross was saying. Depending on your audience, I grew up in the generation that liked the Carol Burnett show, and that lasted an hour. You sat down in front of the television. Then you had the smaller TV series. Everything was a half hour. Now we get everything down to 15 minutes and 10 minutes. So it depends on the generation that you're serving. At the Lakuta Rave Reservation, where I'm working at, I have a lot of elders who have no idea. They're getting their phones and their laptops for Christmas from their kids, and they have no idea what to do with it. And so then I looked at that generation likes to sit down, pick up the remote, blink on the TV. I got a 75-year-old dad downstairs in my house. It's on all the time. But he doesn't realize he's actually streaming these different channels. And some of the local stuff. Anyways, long story short, I went into public radios where I'm at now. I'm the engineer at WOJB, public radio station there. Very independent programming. We're not part of the WPR network. And we have to create a lot of our local community interest programming. And that's where I started to see an interest in what we were talking about and the different guests that we had. So I put my PEG Access hat on and thought, well, I can do this content. I know what it's done. And if you need to as well, I have handouts there by the video projector. But most of you have all this. What's your programming? I outlined all the different events and activities and, you know, school district, tribal meetings, local community meetings, live webcams. We're also the county seat. So I have a lot of county information that can go out there. So providing the same stuff that you do on cable, I figured I don't have to deal with buying an old SD system or upgrading an SD system to HD because YouTube comes in HD. All of the cameras we shoot with here are HD, and it's much easier to do in that. And that now we have younger people. I look at James's department there. It's all young people, and that audience is your short attention span type of kids who grew up with this stuff all the time. Now, I have a couple of vloggers in Hayward, and they have a big following. They do 5-minute videos. I went to them and I says, I want to take the last 4 5-minute videos you did and edit them together to create a long format, which is almost like a soap opera. If you look at a soap opera, they change the subject every 5 minutes just to keep you going because there's other stories that are happening. So I figured, let's do that. The problem is funding. Now, I just received my nonprofit, so I'm not, just to let you know, I haven't done a thing yet except wait for the IRS to say you're a nonprofit. Now I have to go to my tribal friends who are very good at grant writing and say, what can we do for educational programming in the community, whether it's learning Ojibwe languages, understanding what tribal traditions are. Then I can actually have a relationship through the public radio station. I already have a relationship with my county officials, my city, township, and tribal. And they all know who I am because I wear a tropical shirt 24/7, 365 days of the year. And I kind of, it is a brand. My brand name is actually Remarkable, is my brand name. So, but people in the North Woods of Wisconsin, a guy walking in a tropical shirt kind of sticks out, you know, it's a little strange, kind of like our Sid did last night when he came in. It was like, and he was actually attracted to me by my shirt. So he sat at my table. I said, I gotta know that guy. There's something different about him. Anyways, so I don't know. I feel like I'm this white rat in a cage and I'm the experiment. And can I make this work from the ground up? When I looked at the grants and the grants I can get is after the grant is done, how do I sustain that from this point on? Now, thankfully, I have a couple tribal members on my board, and they know how to get grants. When the one expires, even before the one expires, they have another one coming up in the chute. So I have some sustainability there because I have a minority community that's very interested in making this work. In fact, through the public radio station I'm on, we also stream, and I'm looking at creating a second streaming channel just for Ojibwe language programming. Easy to do. I just have to put my ENCO automation system together and get the content, create it, and we're ready to go. So that's what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know. So, and my challenge to Wisconsin Community Media and the Alliance for Community Media is I don't fit here. I am not a cable channel. I don't have the label, but I create the content very, exactly to what you do. So how do you become an organization to be more inclusive of other community media centers that aren't necessarily on cable? And I wrote down, I says, well, we could go back to the NFLCP, call it the National Federation of Local Community Programmers. It's in the same with, Wisconsin Community Media. It's already branded for that. It doesn't say cable in the name anymore. And how do you include other organizations who are either going dark on cable and now they don't fit because they're streaming only? So how do you keep those organizations and those communities involved? So with that, I yield to
Okay, so it's not a simple question, is it? And that's kind of what I was looking at, is that there are no simple answers to this, but it is something that we're all going to have to deal with. How quickly technology changes, and it's just something that you're going to need to think about. You need to think about developing audiences and where to develop those audiences. We just got a couple of minutes left. Are there any other questions or comments, Jeff?
Yeah, since I have the microphone.
Let's keep talking about you.
Sure. So we're a Teleview station, and Teleview keeps telling us, Teleview is really good at promising things, and then they eventually come, but they usually take longer than they say they're going to.
Is this a sales pitch?
And they've said there's going to be a paywall option for us pretty soon, which I would be interested in as a way to raise revenue. So I could see a situation if this works. I know this opens up a whole nother can of worms, but if this works, we might actually be sort of discouraging people from watching our cable channel because then we can't make paywall funds off of it that we can make off the streaming. So that is something I'm curious about when
So
that comes up.
the organization that has implemented a paywall policy the most aggressively that I've seen is I think it's North TV in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. A guy named Peter Gay is the executive director. Peter actually will be speaking at the national conference in Brooklyn. So come for the answer then. No. Peter's philosophy is that they're getting cable franchise fees. They don't want to disadvantage the cable franchise payer, the customer. So if you've got a cable subscription, you get the content for free. If you're not a cable subscriber, you have to pay a membership, I think. I don't know that they're doing like a per view.
Right.
Because I think that that you'd be collecting pennies for every view. I mean, it's not really worth your time, unless you've got viewership through the roof, and it's millions of views. So I think what he's doing is he's asking for a membership for a non-cable subscriber. Cable subscribers can get it for free.
Okay.
I
Access to 24 hours.
Correct. Correct. I don't know that a paywall paywalls are controversial in content industries because they do the very thing that you're talking about, Jeff. They discourage people from actually using content. You know, I subscribe to Google News feed, so I get information about community television stations across the United States. The local newspapers that don't have paywalls, I can actually find things out. I'm not going to subscribe to the Connecticut Advertiser, so I can read one article. It makes no sense. I'm probably an odd instance for this, but I think there's a dispute within the content field, like particularly within journalism, if that's the best way to build subscriber base. There's probably a,
New York Times was here yesterday, and they're not charging for content. They're doing a membership.
They're doing a membership, yeah. So membership or subscription models have been promoted to some really good effect in local newspapers, and and we see that membership models working within community radio throughout the United States. I think there's wisdom to building a relationship with somebody who's a member of your organization because they love your organization, not because they're reading an article, right? Because when you stop producing something that they want to read, they'll drop your subscription. And then there's also been evidence that shows that people end up chasing subscribers. So if you're only doing certain types of content for people who can pay, you end up creating content for a limited class of people, not for everybody in your community. Right? It's just snakes.
So there's a lot of really interesting questions. That
Yeah, but I think the jury is out on the paywall. The jury is out on it, but finding a way to build that relationship with a consumer that you can continue to have, I think is essential.